Yeah, so this is the presentation, Jim. One of the things we're experimenting here is to make this feel as real as possible. But context-wise, you sat in this audience, and sometimes good stories were told, sometimes no stories were told, and sometimes horrible stories were told. So just to set up the context for today's training, what was your experience at this event, having sat through, I think, like an entire afternoon?
Well, first of all, that room is so dark and big and kind of cool. And I don't mean cool like in it's cool. I mean it's cool like it's temperature wise. And so it's really interesting because, they are what 3 days of pitches that are presented on this stage in Silicon Valley Plug and Play. And so what's really interesting is I think to connect to what we're talking about today, storytelling, is that the pitches that were more memorable because I'm sitting through all day of pitches or maybe a specific market of pitches, I the ones that have stories are the ones that are memorable. The ones that have callbacks in their stories, the stories are directly related to their product or service that they're offering. Those are the ones that stand out the most. And I think the storytelling is a great opportunity to highlight your service or product. And so when it comes to storytelling, it's not just about highlighting service or product, it's also a way of highlighting you, right? And your skills and how you show up. So storytelling is a really great way to educate people on who you are, not just what you offer.
Thanks, Yirma. Craig,
You're
I'm
welcome.
going to bring you in for a different perspective. So Craig and I met and we were at a conference together where instead of single presenters, most of the sessions were panels. And Craig, in the panels that you saw or the panel that you were on, tell us about how stories can help or hurt a panelist when they share into a conversation.
Well, I think fundamentally stories are one of the most core human things. I think it is the fundamental thing that differentiates us from almost any other animal on this planet, at least that we know. And I think it's it's storytelling, right? So beyond just this word storytelling is this really primitive, powerful thing. So where I'm going with that is I think when used well, it's the hook between we all data, but like the emotional connector. It creates context. And I heard once that they did mapping of the brain that if I give you some data to process, a little part of your brain lights up. But if I tell you a story with that same data, all of your brain lights up. So as a panelist or any sort of speaker, if you can harness that and understand that, they're hooks to truly, it's that the emotional connection with your audience comes in the story, the relevance and the connection. The more powerful you can leverage that mechanism, the better. Where do they go wrong? Stories can often we lose track of time when we tell stories. They can go long. It can be too much detail. We're not keeping on this the narrative. We're putting in superfluous. I'm just going to go with that. Words, and somebody can correct me in a second. So I think the art is practicing it and feeling good enough that you can go that same emotional thing. If it gets messy or fuzzy, can disrupt the connection as well.
Thanks, Craig. And for me, I'll add a little bit of context before we jump into the micro training. Before I do that, I'd like to welcome everyone to the presentation gym. Everyone here is a familiar face. We have some that have joined us from the Transform conference, some from the Mosh Pit. Dylan, I recognize you from the Plug and Play community. So this particular workout is surrounding or all going to be about storytelling. Whether you are doing storytelling as a solo presenter on stage, Dylan, this is what the Plug and Play stage looks like, or if you're in a panel. And I know, Cheryl, you're familiar with all of the panels that occurred in the Transform, right? Transform conference. So we're going
Hey
to do
Anthony,
a
before
little,
we go on, can I lean
yeah,
on our audience for a second?
yeah,
Who's
yeah.
going to help me here? What was my word? What was the word I was looking for?
Superfluous.
Superfluous. There it is. Thank you. We can move on now.
Thank you so much. All right, storytelling. We're going to give you some tools so that you can easily integrate a story. This could be a case study or a personal story into a presentation, into a answer if you're part of a panel, into a conversation. Like Craig says, it's a typical thing for storytellers to get lost. And when they get lost, the audience gets lost and they check out. So here, we're going to have each of you jump on stage, tell the story, and we'll coach you through it. The purpose here is to have fun. The three of us will do a micro training. Then I'm going to go to each of you so you can share with us what would you like to work on in this particular workout. Then we'll go into breakout rooms. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the storyteller voice, case studies and personal stories. Irma, before sharing samples, a lot of people question, why bring a personal story on stage at all? It's not relevant to business. What's the value in sharing it? And there's a saying that you and I both subscribe to: how you do anything is how you do everything. Can you break that down?
I think it's valuable because it demonstrates character. You can share a story that will share your character, competency, and let's talk about the 3 C's. What is it? Character, competency, and credibility, right?
Yay!
So and again, like, people buy into not so much like they buy a lot into who you are, right? And a personal story is definitely relevant in how you overcome a challenge, in how you might face adversity, or maybe how you bring people or community together or family together. There's so many different personal stories that you can share that will demonstrate one of those 3 principles, right, of sharing a personal story, whether it be character, credibility, or competency.
Thanks, Irma. So if you are selecting a story to practice today, you choose either one. Okay. If you have a case study, great. If you don't, share a personal story. And it doesn't have to be related to business. We just want you to develop your storytelling muscles. Now, Craig, I'm going to go over to you. A story is told with a different voice, right? It's not with your leadership voice. It's not with visionary voice or a Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy voice. A storyteller voice sounds a certain way. For me, when I listen, the way I can tell is the voice sounds different because it sounds relatable. It's empathetic and it's heart-centered. I know you and I, we talked about energy when we were in the green room. Just how can you tell just from vocal intonation that a person has shifted into storytelling voice?
I don't know if I can answer directly on intonation, but what I would say when I think about story is what makes story unique is that when in a leadership position, it's me wanting to lead you somewhere. In an expert, in a teacher position, it's me wanting to teach you something. In a storyteller voice, a story has some very fundamental components. There is a character, there is a challenge, there is a journey, and there's a resolution. I mean, that is right. I mean, everybody writes a story. So I think what you're listening for is, have you moved from talking to me as you, or talking to me, even if it's you, taking me back to a point in time when you went through this thing? You can be the subject, you can be the hero of the story, or it could be somebody else. So I think I'd be listening for, did we just shift tone from this person talking to me in some way or another to this person now has brought in an event, they're setting up a situation, there's a challenge or something that needs to be overcome, and how was that resolved?
Thanks, Craig. So what I'm going to show here is, this is something we cover every single time. When you're on stage, we want you to use this. It's called the engagement loop. Now, the scene that's behind all of our faces is a pitching event. And what goes wrong at pitching events is that it's all data-driven. It's all head-centered instead of heart-centered. We want you to do both. Right? The light bulb represents a call to think. You want to share with them a nugget of wisdom. You want to teach them something about your product, about your solution. That needs to be complemented by a call to feel. And that's how stories can come into play. Stories, when you tell it, it converts the theoretical into the practical, right? If you tell a story, then one, I'll get the story, but I can potentially put myself in the story. Imagine myself as the hero and you guiding me from point A to point B. So that's the call to feel. And the final thing, and this is at the conclusion of your presentation, once you've done a call to think, a call to feel, now it's a call to act. Typically here, it's another conversation. It could be a coffee shop conversation. It could be find me when I get off stage. It could be meet me at my demo station. So this is the engagement loop, and how stories particularly serve this loop is the call to feel. Now, we're going to go into some examples before we let you all take the stage. And this is the storytelling structure as Craig alluded to. Step one, you set the scene. Okay, tell us about the problem that existed. Okay, who was in this scene? What problem did they have and what were they feeling? The second one is the journey. What journey or highlights of the journey, because it's a short story, happened when you took them from point A to point B? And the final part is obviously you reached a finish line. There was something you celebrated at the end. Okay, so this is the structure. This is the exercise we want all of you to do. And we're going to go through some samples. We have some personal stories. We have some case studies. All right, Irma, take it away.
Okay, great. So, so let's share my story. So I have a younger sister who always signs me up for something. She is typically, can you be the VP of the athletic boosters? Can you be a member of my nonprofit, a board member of my nonprofit? And she asked for a big ask. I mean, they're all big asks, but this one seemed a really big one because I don't have kids, number one. And number two, she wanted to launch a spring soccer season in her city through PAL. And they hadn't done spring soccer before, and they were in desperate need of coaches, and they just needed one more coach. And I have some experience playing soccer, not very much, but some. And she said, "Hey, will you coach these under 10 boys?" And of course, I said yes because I don't say no to her, not very often at least. And so I got the kids that nobody chose. So I have these under 10 boys that have no experience with soccer, that really they were just kind of thrown together, and their parents wanted them to try soccer. And so I committed, I got a co-coach, and I trained with these boys, and it was so much fun because they learned a little bit about soccer, and they were like in that in between stage where they were like, some of them had a little bit of a growth spurt, so they weren't really quite running on both feet. They would stumble a little bit, which is kind of interesting at that age for me to see that. And again, like it's really interesting and fun. We never won a game all season. We almost won the last game. We did score our first point in the last game, but the biggest takeaway I think for these kids was, one, they had more confidence. Number two, they had fun doing it, and they learned a little bit of soccer. And I also learned that one of the kids who actually scored the point, he went on to play even higher levels of soccer after that. So it was a really great experience. But most of all, I think the kids got to win in that scenario. They got more than what I did.
Let's give Irma a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, the exercise for all of you who are joining today, inside of chat, I want you to share with Irma what you heard. Did you hear an element of her character? Did you hear any element of credibility where she took someone from point A to point B? Or did you hear one of her superpowers? That's a competency element. So go ahead and type those into chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to queue up Craig for his story. Now, Craig brings not a personal story, but a case study to the stage. So, Craig, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. Look, I'll be quick about it. The story I was thinking about really has to do with working with a CEO, and the CEO, a little bit of context, had just come into the role. He had been a CEO before. He had taken over about this 200-person company, and he was brought in, after the founder and co-founder had been kind of shuffled around, and he was there to help really usher them into the new where they were going. So you can kind of gain a sense of what was going on. So he was in seat, really smart guy. And the first thing he decided to do was he wanted to do some culture work. He wanted to do an assessment of the culture. And that's where I came in and helped them run some surveys and present feedback and information. So Clearly, he knew a lot was going on. He'd been there about 6 months at the time. He had been having conversations. He was aware there were a lot of issues. It was a cultural transformation. Um, and part of the story is really about the power of data and how we can use data to make better decisions. So basically, what happened was we ran this survey, and I was able to present this information to him and his executive team. And we were able to look at it in different ways. And as we had a conversation and hearing what was going on, we decided, well, let's look at this information, looked at it across your different offices. And what we noticed was it was very clear that most of the offices were kind of, for most part, their scores were in a certain range. But there was one office that was way out of range compared to the others, which is problematic around engagement and turnover. But what was so special was I saw him light up when he saw it, and he goes, I knew it. Like, I know there's a problem there. I've been hearing about it, but now I see the problem. It's so clear. I need to get down there. And within a week or two, he had hopped on a plane and spent 2 or 3 days with that team. And then over the next 6 months, went down again and spent more time with them. And it was really great. He was texting us, I'm down here. It's so good. We ran a survey again, and the scores came up like 18 points. And in the end, I really think from everything I saw, the biggest thing was the fact that he simply paid attention and went there. But the other part of the story is the power of data. Not that he knew there was an issue, but when we can quantify situations and help people that make decisions see things both from a story perspective, but also from a quantifiable or a data perspective, action can happen. And in the end, he didn't have to run a robust program. He didn't have to invest tons of money. He simply went down there and spent time with them, and we saw a massive improvement. So I think that's a great story that helps kind of from a professional context and how we can leverage data in simple ways to drive change in our organizations.
All right, let's give Greg a round of applause. All right, Irma, just so you can see, and actually I'm learning how to do this as well, we got a couple of shout outs. Here's what Joe said for you.
Anthony,
Cheryl?
your audio, and you might not change it now, but your audio it's like almost like an air conditioner in the background right now. But keep going, it's fine. But
you know what? I'm going to be messy. There is an air conditioner going on, so I'll shut this off. I would love fantastic here for sharing into chat. I'd love for anyone who feels like giving Craig some shout outs. What did you hear? When you go ahead and say it, you'll be in the active window. I'm going to take this opportunity to take a little bit of a timeout and shut off the air conditioning. So who would love to share with Craig if you heard credibility, competency, or character?
Yeah, I think from your perspective, you showed the competency by showing the CEO that, okay, well, sometime making micro changes can lead to bigger changes. And then he also followed up on that and really showed the credibility by showing up and whatever your call to action for him or her was, actually following it through to see that change. So since there are two characters in this, I think each really demonstrated that.
All right. So I'm going to tell one more, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms. And this happened at a Starbucks in San Jose off of Bascom Avenue. So my partner and I were at a Starbucks. We grabbed our coffee, and we were starting to walk outside the cafe. And in front of us, we saw a crowd gathered around the scene. So closest to us, there was a motorcyclist on the ground. A few feet away was his downed motorcycle. And many feet away was a car turned sideways. So my partner Ruth and I were looking around. There's like 40 people on the street doing nothing. They're just looking. And both of us said, this is stupid. So Ruth runs over to the motorcyclist. She has pre-med training, so she attends to the motorcyclist. Me, I don't have any pre-med training, so I jump in the middle of the street to direct traffic, right, around the car, around the motorcycle, so that no further incidents happen. And we continue to do this until the fire department, the ambulance, the police cars arrive. And once everybody was there, we walked back to the Starbucks, grabbed our coffees, and then continued about our day. So why in the heck am I telling a Starbucks story? Well, consider the profession that I'm in, that Irma and Craig joins me in often, we're at conferences. And think about what happens when a conference producer hears this story. In their world, conference producer, things go sideways all the time. So through this story, I want them to get, no matter what happens, things hit the fan. I'm going to remain calm. I'm going to get into action. I've got you. I've got the participants. I've got the speakers. I've got this event. So that's the power of a personal story. The how you do anything is how you do everything. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to invite folks to the stage, and there's always 3 options that we have. You can choose, number 1, to do the exercise. Share a story using this framework. Number 2, you can perform or practice a presentation that's coming up for you. You'll get 2-3 minutes on stage. You'll go through that presentation, and then we'll give you feedback. And finally, ask questions. If you don't want to take the stage, if you have a burning question about the world of presentations, how to prepare, we can all hold space for that.